There are few men around who in 8 minutes can introduce new models of global problem-solving, cooperation and governance. But one man who perhaps can, who can rise to the challenge, is the best-selling author, Canada's favorite son, Don Tapscott, the author of the best-selling Macrowikinomics, which has a new edition coming out next month. And Don has very generously agreed to come on the show and in 8 minutes introduce these new models. So, Don, welcome back to TechCrunch TV.
Great to be here. Actually here this time.
So, Don, the stage is yours.
Well, here's the topic. That the world is broken and we have a whole bunch of problems. And I don't think I need to convince anyone of that. It's a very volatile, dangerous place, and if we keep doing what we're doing, eventually we're going to extinguish civilization. So we need to solve these global problems, but we have a big problem. The world is organized into nation states, and we have institutions that bring together nation states to try and address these issues and to cooperate and, in a sense, govern the planet. But they're failing miserably. And they're necessary, but they're insufficient.
So you mean what, United Nations?
Yeah, the institutions being, well actually, most of them came out of a previous period in history, and a lot of them after the Second World War.
I hope you're not going to blame the British for this.
It's all because of the Brits. I'm a Canadian, I'm in one of the colonies. So anyway, I should be reverential to you sitting here. So we had the Marshall Plan. The leaders met in Bretton Woods, 42 countries, and they created the UN, they created the World Bank, and eventually the IMF, the WTO, the GATT, Global Agreement on Trades and Tariffs. We created the G20, the G8, the G whatever, and these institutions are having a terrible time. So example, climate change, big problem in my mind. Bill Clinton was saying to some of us at Davos that if we reduce carbon emission by 80% in the year 2050, it'll still take 1,000 years for the planet to cool down. In the meantime, some bad things will happen, like a billion and a half people will lose half of their water supply in the next 10 to 20 years. So we have to fix this. All these states go off to Copenhagen or to Cancun or wherever. They can't get a deal. Now the good news is, meanwhile, there are these new models of global problem solving that are emerging. On that issue, there are probably, I don't know, 10, 15 million people that are just self-organizing around this. And they're not Malcolm Gladwell's slacktivists, you know, go like on Facebook and figure they're changing the world. They're people who are actually doing something. And they're architects figuring out how to retrofit old buildings, and they're school kids trying to reduce carbon in their schools. And they're, you know, tax policy people discussing and collaborating on this. So what we have is this global movement where this is the first time in human history where the world is sort of being mobilized, but we're all on the same side. We've been mobilized around world wars before, but we were on different sides. So the killer app for the internet may be, in this case, turning out to be saving the planet, literally. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just launching a big project. This is the first time I've talked about it publicly, where I'm trying to figure out what are these new global models of problem solving? What makes them tick? How do they work? And what are their problems? So that's the idea.
And what could you imagine them looking like? Will they be based on wikis? Will they reflect Facebook? Will they be distributed? Will they be open source?
All of the above. And also, the type of networks are very, very different. There's no taxonomy really to talk about all this stuff. There's no language. So for example, we have single issue movements that are addressing poverty, like Kiva, microfinancing to get $70 to a farmer in sub-Saharan Africa to buy a pump so that he can or she can irrigate a field. Then there are these multi-issue organizations like the Clinton Global Initiative or the World Economic Forum that are much more elaborate. There are ideation networks that are trying to come up with new ideas to solve problems, doing challenges and brainstorms. There are watchdogs like Human Rights Watch that are trying to find out what's going on with journalists who are being victimized. There are networks for advocacy. Now, a good example would be Coney 2012. That was a network that has a whole bunch of stakeholders that's trying to solve the problem of Coney. But the Coney case raises a whole bunch of really important issues around this. All these networks, they may be inspired, but are they legitimate? Who are they accountable to? Who are they representative of? How do you get to participate in them? Like the Coney thing, you know, where does the money go? How do you influence the policy? Is it really right, as that video calls, to bring in American troops into Africa? What happens if the leader has a meltdown? You know, what's the process whereby you can change the leadership in a movement? And this is the Wild West. I mean, this is a whole new thing that we don't really know what these things are and how to make them successful.
So if Coney 2012 is the future, or at least a version of it, you still remain optimistic?
Well, I think that all of the problems with Coney are endemic of, are reflective of the fact that we don't really know a lot about these new movements. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm bringing together all the world's leaders to,
all of them?
Oh, not the world's leaders, the world's leading thinkers.
Like? You haven't invited me.
Well, you are now invited. This is a real-time thing as it's working. But are you a world's leading thinker?
No,
I'm not sure.
I was leading. I gave you the opportunity.
Yeah, to go. I don't think so. You know, so I've got people like Jonathan Zittrain at Harvard, and I've got the head of Transparency International, and Parag Khanna, wrote a book on how to fix the world, and Richard Florida, who's thinking about one side of this problem. You got all these global networks. Everything in the middle is becoming less important as we disintermediate nation states, and he's very focused on cities, which is where a lot of the action is going as well. So so what we're going to do is a bunch of case studies, a bunch of white papers, try and create a clearinghouse so next time someone wants to create a movie to find some bad guy in Africa, they may actually go there, and it may help them to do the right thing and to do it effectively.
Well, Don Tapscott, I'm not sure if the new model currently exists, but you did a pretty good job in about 8 minutes and 30 seconds. What are the next steps on this? If people are interested in participating, should they contact you?
Well, I'm at DTapscott on Twitter, and just send me a note, or don@tapscott.com. I check my own email. And we're looking for people who can help. We're really looking for volunteers, and we're also looking for funds from foundations and other organizations. So it'll be a multi-million-dollar project, and I think, you know, people talk about changing the world. I actually want to change the world with this effort. Well,
for a man who at least outlined changing the world in 8 minutes, it's always a pleasure to have you on my show, and I hope that this initiative becomes real, and you'll come back on the show very soon to tell me more about what you're up to. Don Tapscott, thank you so much for appearing on TechCrunch TV.
My pleasure.